be here sooner than he or any of us will realize.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Corey Evan, coming up in the Weekender. The now convicted Boston Marathon bomber now awaits fate, which will be here sooner than he or any of us will realize. It's all about the kids at school in this week's continuing battle against global socialism. This week, the crimes are, as I describe them, all wet in crime and pinheads. Our game show News Minute takes flight this week, literally. And we get to hear how the good boys and girls spent their spring break. Boys and girls, it's time to stop and smell the roses. No, really, I've got rose bushes outside my studio. The Weekender starts now.
Making sense of the week's news and the most of your weekend. From Southern California, this is the SHR Weekender with Corey Evans.
Ah, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is a beautiful day here in Southern California. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and I hope it's beautiful wherever you are listening to this weekend's SHR Weekender. Let's get started with one from Reuters. The Boston Marathon bombing trial enters a new phase on April 21st as federal prosecutors begin to mount their case for putting Dzhokhar Tsarnaev to death for killing 3 people and injuring 264 others in the 2013 attack. The same jury that on Wednesday found Tsarnaev guilty of carrying out one of the most shocking attacks on U.S. soil since September 11th will hear from more prosecution and defense witnesses before determining whether to sentence him to death or life in prison without possibility of parole. The prosecution is expected to portray the ethnic Chechen as an Islamic extremist adherent of al-Qaeda who planted one of the 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs at the race's finish line on April 15, 2013 because he wanted to punish America for what it was doing to his people, in the words of Assistant U.S. Attorney Alok Chakravarty. The defense, meanwhile, is expected to play up the role of his 26-year-old brother Tamerlan in carrying out the attack. In closing arguments last week, defense attorney Judith Clark contended that Tamerlan was the driving force behind the bombing, with Dzhokhar following along. Tamerlan died during the brothers' chaotic final day of freedom. 3 days after the bombing, the pair shot dead a police officer and carjacked a Chinese businessman as they attempted to flee the city. The carjacking victim escaped and alerted police to their plan, setting the stage for a gunfight between the Tsarnaevs and law enforcement that ended when Dzhokhar roared off in the stolen SUV, running over his brother. During the guilt phase of the trial, U.S. District Judge George O'Toole had limited the amount of evidence the defense could present about the relationship between the brothers, who had immigrated to the U.S. from Russia a decade before the attack. But the sentencing phase, which the Justice Department announced on Friday would begin on April 21st, will provide the defense with an opportunity to focus on that element of the case and possibly call Tsarnaev to testify. The death penalty is controversial in Massachusetts, where it's illegal under state law, but allowed in federal cases. The state has not seen an execution since 1947, but it is our hope here at SHR Media that this case has brought about some sort of change of heart over there about the death penalty. I mean, in some cases it is rather necessary, like this one. I mean, where I go to church, we believe that if you take the life of an innocent person, the law requires your life. That's what I base my views on, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sticking to them. Yes, sir. Now, this next story from NBC New York, this one is going to put some of you on edge, so forgive me in advance.
Yellow alert activated.
A New York City woman accused of getting married 10 times over an 11-year period as part of an apparent immigration scam pled not guilty to felony fraud charges in the Bronx court on Friday and then got arrested again a short time later for allegedly trying to evade a subway fare. Liana Barrientos was arrested along with her 19-year-old niece when she went through the emergency exit door at 149th Street and Grand Concourse subway station without paying the fare, police said. She was charged with theft of service and criminal trespassing. Barrientos was arraigned in Bronx criminal court Friday night on those charges and released on her own reconnaissance. That's according to the district attorney's office. Her niece was also released on her own reconnaissance. Earlier, Barrientos walked past a line of media on her way to the Bronx courtroom. Neither she nor her attorney spoke to reporters. Barrientos took a seat in the back row as she waited for her name to be called. At one point, she pulled out a hairbrush and combed her hair until a courtroom officer told her the behavior was not permitted. Barrientos is charged with offering a false instrument after allegedly obtaining marriage certificates with 10 men between 1999 and 2010. She never filed for divorce, the criminal complaint alleges, though several of her husbands, several of whom are from so-called red flag countries including Egypt, Turkey, Georgia, Pakistan, and Mali, filed divorce paperwork after using her to file applications to become lawful permanent residents of the U.S. Only 2 of their applications for permanent residency were approved. One of the husbands, whose application was rejected, was deported to his home country of Pakistan in 2006 after a joint terrorism task force investigation found he made threatening statements toward the U.S. Barrientos is allegedly currently married to 4 men, husbands she acquired in 2001, 2002, 2006, and 2010. At one time, she was married to as many as 8 men, authorities allege. She was arrested after applying for a 10th marriage in the Bronx in 2010. During that process, she signed documents saying it was her first and only marriage, which prosecutors say constitutes fraud. Absolutely does. I mean, when you remarry, you really should be all done with your previous marriage. I mean, I understand if there are 1 or 2 polygamists out there who are listening to this and thinking,
"Hey! I resemble that remark."
And to you, I say, it's resent. But anyway, back to the news. Meteorologists from the National Weather Service have been surveying northern Illinois areas hit by tornadoes and say it looks like one of them may have had winds of up to 200 miles an hour, according to the Washington Post. Preliminary reports Friday show at least 1 tornado touched down near Fairdale on Thursday evening. Meteorologist Jamie Enderlin said there's still work to be done, but so far it's been classified as an EF4, which means it had wind speeds from 166 to 200 miles an hour. She says there's not yet an official count on the number of tornadoes or full details about them. The National Weather Service has said there were at least 2 tornadoes in a 6-county area. Emergency officials in the tornado-damaged Illinois community of Fairdale say they are confident everyone has been accounted for, thankfully. Crews have been going through the wreckage since Thursday evening looking for missing people after at least 1 tornado struck the area. 2 women from the community were killed, unfortunately. DeKalb County Sheriff Roger Scott told reporters Friday that he didn't expect to find additional victims. Kirkland Fire Department Chief Chad Connell says 3 crews also were conducting their searches with cadaver dogs, but he also said he was confident no other victims would be found in the rubble. Connell says residents likely would not be allowed to return to their damaged homes until Saturday. Authorities say that with the debris and lack of power, it remained too dangerous. And there are quite a few updates on this story from the Washington Post, and I'm going to go ahead and put those up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/SHR Weekender. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and families of those involved. And from the Miami Herald, U.S. President Barack Obama and Cuban leader Raul Castro shared a stage and took part in a gala dinner on Friday at the opening of the 7th Summit of the Americas as the formerly hostile nations continued their slow dance toward reconciliation. While there's still a huge chasm to close for countries that haven't had diplomatic relations since 1961, the opening ceremony came amid speculation that the 2 leaders might have a more substantial conversation Saturday and that the communist island might be taken off the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. Friday evening, Obama and Castro greeted each other and shook hands, according to the White House. Ben Rhodes, a deputy national security advisor and one of the architects of the new Cuba policy, said he expected a more substantial conversation between the 2 leaders Saturday. Quote, "We certainly do anticipate that they will have the opportunity to see each other at the summit Saturday to have a discussion," he said. Rhodes said the Cubans were also anticipating that there would be a time for such a conversation on the sidelines of the summit. The U.S. and Cuba have been in talks to normalize relations since December, and while on a trip to Jamaica Thursday, Obama said that he received a recommendation from the State Department about Cuba's status as a state sponsor of terrorism. There have been reports that a status change could be announced this week. Rhodes said Friday that the president's national security staff was reviewing the State Department's recommendation, though he added that we're not all the way through the process. This is the first time Cuba has been invited to the gathering of hemispheric leaders since the event was launched in 1994, and of course not everyone is happy with its presence or its possible removal from the terrorism list. Among fugitives from U.S. justice who have been granted political asylum in Cuba is Asada Shakur, also known as Joanne Cheshimard. A Black Liberation Army member, she was convicted of the 1973 murder of a New Jersey state trooper and was serving a life sentence when she escaped from jail in 1979 and lived underground until she fled to Cuba. Long-standing tensions within Cuban society were also on display Friday when Cuban dissidents and supporters of the Cuban government clashed outside the Hotel Panama, where a civil society forum brought together leaders from a broad cross-section of the Americas. Let's just hope that these leaders know what the heck they're doing, because this could all go bad very quickly. And here are some things going on at the schools that have gone very badly wrong in our continuing battle against global socialism. First up from Fox News, California lawmakers on Wednesday advanced a bill that would require school children in the state to be vaccinated amid impassioned pleas from parents and doctors, even activist Robert Kennedy Jr. Oh no, Robert Kennedy Jr. Ugh. Under the proposal, parents would no longer be able to send unvaccinated kids to school with waivers citing religious or personal beliefs. Exemptions would be available only for children with health problems. Supporters say the measure would increase the number of vaccinated young people and improve public health. Ariel Loop told lawmakers that such a plan could have prevented her child from contracting measles at Disneyland. Quote, "My infant shouldn't have had to suffer. He shouldn't, still months later, be having complications with his eyes," she said. "I shouldn't have had to fear for his life," unquote. Opponents, however, say vaccines can be as dangerous as the diseases they aim to fight, and that the bill would trample parental rights. The measure, SB 277 from Senator Richard Pan, was in the earliest stages of the legislative process, but it drew large crowds, including parents who brought their children. During the emotionally charged hearing, one opponent threatened to put a curse on lawmakers who voted for the bill, and another woman was removed after an outburst. The bill passed out of the Senate Health Committee on a 6-2 vote Wednesday. If the bill passes the legislature and signed by the governor, California would join Mississippi and West Virginia as the only states with such strict vaccine rules. Similar efforts to reduce exemptions were proposed elsewhere after a measles outbreak in December that started at Disneyland and sickened more than 100 people across the U.S. and in Mexico. In Oregon and Washington state, however, such proposals were rejected recently. Opponents include Kennedy, the nephew of President JFK, and son of former U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy. And here's one out of Alaska from NBC affiliate KTUU. Legislation pending in the Senate would allow parents to opt their child out of any class or activity that they deem harmful to their child. Quote, "Parents have rights. Parents have always had rights. Those rights have never been extinguished. It's the basis of what our country is built upon," said Senator Mike Dunleavy. Dunleavy, who also chairs the Senate Education Committee, sponsored the bill. It includes an amendment preventing abortion service providers from contracting with school districts and education service organizations. It also bars those providers from distributing materials and instruction to students. Dunleavy says his bill codifies what was put into the Constitution at statehood, that parents have a say in their child's education. The bill also requires parents to be notified 2 weeks in advance of when a sexual education class will be taught, and requires them to fill out paperwork giving their child permission to take the class. Well done, Alaska. That's exactly what we're looking for here. Bills that support the rights of parents, not extinguish them. Somebody tell that to the legislature here in California. And from ABC News out of New Jersey, a New Jersey school district has suspended a teacher for having her third grade class write get well letters to a sick inmate convicted of killing a Philadelphia policeman. Ugh. Orange School Superintendent Ronald Lee said in a statement Friday that the school's administrators vehemently deny any knowledge of Marilyn Zuniga's assignment. Lee says that preliminary inquiries found that Zuniga, who teaches at the 4th Street School, didn't seek approval, nor were parents notified. The letters were delivered to Mumia Abu Jamal, who is serving life in prison for the 1981 murder of white Philadelphia officer Daniel Faulkner. His family said he was hospitalized last month to be treated for complications from diabetes. Outside Forest Avenue Elementary School Friday night, parents could not quite believe it. A lesson plan for third graders that's become a national controversy. But administrators say Zuniga sought no permission when she had her students write the cards to Abu Jamal. Zuniga tweeted her kids wrote to him to lift his spirits. I hope for your sake that's true, Mr. Lee, because I don't want my kids writing to a convicted felon, especially if it gives them a way to find out where my kids live someday. So, when will the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention finally do their homework on the vaccines that they keep pushing? When will the public school system stop perverting sex education? And why didn't my dad ever have the talk room? I feel so left out. Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism. When I come back from this short break, Crime and Pinhead's controversy comes gushing forward. It involves water. If you board a flight in the coming days, you may just become a contestant on a game show at 37,000 feet. And we get to hear how the good boys and girls spent their spring break, doing good things for others. It's going to be a very uplifting experience when we come back on the SHR Weekender on SHR Media. I'm Corey Evan from the Evan Miller Report. Each weeknight, I not only help Jay out in our continuing battle against global socialism and preside over lawsuits across America, but I also bring you the latest market numbers and what's going on in Hollywood, oh, Hollywood. In short, I'm just trying to tie it all together so Obama's minions don't rip it apart.
Join me, Jason Miller, and Corey Evan for the Evan Miller Report, weeknights at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on SHRmedia.com. Also on the iHeartRadio app.
In a world controlled by corrupt politicians,
You got a business. You didn't build that.
a team of ordinary men emerge from the ashes to give voice to the voiceless and hope to the hopeless. Sackhead Sean.
Dude, I'm not saying calf for the stupid pro.
Sackhead Clint.
All good friends of ours usually show up drunk.
Also starring Sacco as the producer.
I'm a little bit drunk, 'cause I'm drinking.
They are the Sackheads Radio Show. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on SHRmedia.com.
You're listening to the SHR Weekender on SHRmedia.com. Once again, here's Corey.
I thank you as always, Sackhead Sean. Sackhead Sean, one of the 3 Sackheads running Sackheads Radio every Wednesday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on SHRmedia.com. Also on the iHeartRadio app. Download that bad boy. Hopefully the SHR Weekender will be on there soon. But since the SHR Weekender is so new, I can't tout it just yet because there are rules to this, unfortunately. Yeah. Never mind, it's time to find out who botched their crimes this week in Crime and Pinheads. Yes, it's that time of the week where we find out who did something so stupid in committing their crimes, or hear about crimes that are just so stupid that was only a matter of time before you got to hear about them. There's just something mesmerizing about men engaging in physical violence in a green-filtered lens, all for the purpose of conveying a very deep message. What exactly is the message? Quit your job for the health of your soul? Quit your job because we all die in the end anyway? Sleep with a woman who glorifies several mental disorders if you weren't dying fast enough after quitting your job? Personally, the only message I gleaned was that I should transition from bar soap to shower gel. To these 3 Delaware daycare employees, existential nihilism is a concept important enough to instill into toddlers. When an incriminating video emerged, these 3 women were charged with assault and child endangerment after encouraging 2 children in their care to duke it out Ed and Brad style. According to Fox News, instead of resolving a dispute over pinching, the employees promoted physical violence among these 2 children for their own amusement. Wicked and sick? Yes, but not as sick wicked as those Fincher angles. Who else would think of filming the deterioration of someone's life from inside a glass blender or whatever? I mean, that's disgusting. That's even worse than dogfights. I mean, thankfully those teachers are out of the classroom for now. I just hope they don't end up back in it. What's the wildest thing you've ever wanted to do? We all have a bucket list of epic proportions, yet most of us at least attempt to keep our goals within legal parameters. For example, my bucket list involves riding all of the biggest roller coasters in the world. Even a few that are in locations like Dubai, Italy, the UK, New York. Heck, I'll even ride a rickety one in Brazil for that matter. But no matter where on the map I ride a roller coaster, you'll find it on Google Maps. It extends all the way to Australia, where a 38-year-old woman claimed that flashing the Street View camera has been on her bucket list, and flash she did. Curiously enough, Google took their sweet time pixelating the image, prompting the perpetrator to request a t-shirt from the company. According to the Smoking Gun, she claims that people are only critical because they're jealous. Luckily, some techie was given the unholy task of entombing the daredevil in a pixelation chamber, not before the initial attempt only succeeded in blurring out her face, leaving the goods out for display. If you can call them goods. I mean, I don't want to see the image. Please, don't show that to me. Thank you. And here's a case of criminality that comes to us from the public television system. Madera County, California sits smack in the middle of the state, and it's mostly farms. As in many parts of the valley, wells have gone dry here, and water prices have soared. Thieves who have been increasingly targeting rural farms are starting to understand that anything water-related is a potential bonanza. Quote, "They're taking the water hoses, taking the copper wiring," says the county's district attorney David Lynn. We've even had instances where they've come in and stolen the water pumps from the farmers, unquote. Lynn has recently launched a new task force so rural residents and farmers can reach a deputy district attorney 24/7 to report crime, including illegal well drilling. I mean, if you're so desperate, why don't you just take those water pumps and go out to the Pacific Ocean, pump some water, and do the desalinization process in your backyard? I mean, you'll pay that much in court fees anyway if you steal someone else's water. I mean, that's just dumb. Dumb criminals, I'm watching you. I'll see you next week in Crime Break-Ins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we always hear about spring break parties gone bad. You know, the kids, they're going out to big parties, many of them dress in bikinis or swim shorts or whatever they wear these days, if they wear anything, and they drink until they're so numb that they can't even feel their nose in front of their face. But there are some kids who would rather not participate in any of that, such as 13 students from Arizona State University spending their spring break in New Orleans helping the community recover from Hurricane Katrina through Project Spring Break. Students from ASU volunteered in New Orleans for the 5th year since 2005 when Hurricane Katrina devastated the area. Susie Park, one of the student volunteers, said that houses were marked with X signs that the Urban Search and Rescue used as a marking system that indicates when the rescue team left the structure, the number of survivors and victims found inside, and hazards to the structure. The participants volunteered with the United Saints Recovery Project and helped in several ways, including a few painting projects, a siding project, tile, drywall, garden work, and helping out the animal rescue of New Orleans, according to Jennifer Johnson, coordinator for Greek Life and Community Service at the Center for Student Involvement. The volunteers worked every day from 9 to 5 and visited the city at night. They tried traditional Cajun food, including alligator? Sick. They visited local museums and famous spots in the city like the French Quarter and Bourbon Street. Of the 76 students that applied, 13 of them, 2 of which are part of the staff at CSI, were selected to take part in the project. The CSI expected more applicants than last year, but Ms. Johnson said they didn't expect to have 76 applicants. Every little bit helps. So way to go, ASU, on that note. Next, from Augusta, Georgia, out of WRDW, many people are working behind the scenes during Masters Week. They're busy serving people from all over the world. Many of them are college students spending their spring breaks hard at work. Danessa Burnett is a junior at Augusta Tech. She's been working Masters Week at Executive Marketing Services for 4 years now. But it's not always fun and games, and even though some of these students are giving up a spring break, Miss Burnett says it's worth it. She says it's a great event, presenting even more opportunities for the future. All these workers go from Sunday to Sunday. Imagine that, taking no days off whatsoever in the span of 7 days. I bet some of them could go for a full 13 days without a single day off, but I won't force them. And from MichiganLive.com, it wasn't much of a vacation, but young people from Georgetown Protestant Reformed Church said they were happy to be working during spring break at the Heritage Christian School campus, the former Freedom Christian Schools campus. Youth group leader Dean Bovin said about 20 teens did heavy landscape work, like pulling old shrubbery and planting new bushes, and shoveling and spreading wood chips during the week of spring break. Inside, people were cleaning, painting, replacing light bulbs and ceiling tiles, and getting the building ready to be occupied by students next fall. Heritage Christian School is for grades K through 8, so the students who are working won't be attending there. They said they didn't mind. They were happy to help get the school, which has been vacant for a year, in shape for the younger kids. And while it's my hope that the common crud never makes its rotten way down the school halls at that newly refreshed school, at the same time, I do appreciate the efforts of those kids to help educate the youth of tomorrow. But there you are, ladies and gentlemen, just a few examples of kids doing something constructive with their spring break, instead of destructive. But never mind, I have to take one more break here, but when I come back, our Game Show News Minute is taking to the skies, in a literal sense. There's a new game show that's taping aboard regularly scheduled flights, so you might want to book a flight after you hear this report. And if you don't travel by plane, you can always travel by car, which brings me to our tip of the week when we come back on the SHR Weekender.
Don't click away. The SHR Weekender will be right back.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state. in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
I'm Corey Evan, the Game Show Geek. It's Saturday, April 11th, 2015. Here's your Game Show News Minute. CBS Studios has inked an exclusive deal with the production company Alpine Labs to license the format rights to The Game Plane, the first game show to be filmed entirely on real, regularly scheduled airline flights. The deal covers territories outside of the US and Canada. And this one is self-explanatory, but essentially, you get on your regularly scheduled flight and you're handed a little card, and if your card is called, you get to play a game on board the airplane and possibly win cash and prizes. It's very simple, and very intriguing to me, a fan of the old cash cab. And here's a gross one. Multimedia entertainment studio Electus announced that Electus International has picked up the format rights for Labor Games, which will air on the TLC network here in the US. In Labor Games, host Lisa Arch surprises a couple in the hospital delivery room with a pop-up game show that will give them the opportunity to win prizes for their baby-to-be. Let's just hope that they don't cause any premature deliveries. And Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, television's two top game shows, each averaging more than 10 million viewers daily, have been renewed through the 2018 season. It was announced yesterday by Joe DeSalvo, president of sales for CBS Television Distribution. The show's hosts Alex Trebek, Pat Sajak, and Vanna White have all renewed their deals through the 2018 season. Though I'm still going to be keeping an eye out for when Alex Trebek announces his retirement, and I will bring you that information when it becomes available. Until then, I'm Corey Evan. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Game Show News Minute. Of those three announcements, the only one that I wish would not come to our screens is the Labor Games, because I think that could be upsetting for some young couples. I'm just saying. But never mind. Speaking of young couples, I'm sure there's some families that are going to take a trip. Some will probably take an airplane trip just to get on that game show, or not. And there are others that'll probably take a trip by car. And I say taking a trip by car is a good idea, because as in it probably costs less per person to drive than by taking a plane, a train, a bus, or if you're Bugs Bunny, tunneling underground. Unless, of course, something goes wrong under the hood. You need to take your car in for a maintenance check first before you take your trip. Have your mechanic check it out for potential issues, and if it needs parts or fluids, do your homework and find out if you can get those parts and fluids cheaper than what the mechanic's going to sell them to you for. And if you know how to change those certain parts and fluids, do it yourself. I mean, if you know how to do these things, or if the neighbor knows how to but needs your help, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty just before you're going on vacation. I mean, those hands aren't going to be needed to do any real work if you're on vacation. And it feels good to learn a thing or two about car maintenance. I mean, I recently changed out my timing belt with the help of a former coworker's husband who actually helped me get under the hood. He did the actual timing belt change. He just told me which parts he needed me to remove so that he could actually get to the belt and take it out, put the new one in, that sort of thing. And we actually killed two birds with one stone. It actually stopped my air conditioning belt squealing every time I turned the car on.